Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
We've been expecting you.
Monday, time for our maven of the supernatural, Denise Pridemore. This is the Paranormal Pride. Join to listen and chat live on WBHM-DB.com or Spreaker app. Search WBHM-DB every Monday at 7 p.m. Central for your supernatural paranormal fix. Welcome to the Paranormal Pride, where the show is about the guest and the listener.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and I hope everybody has had a good week. Before I get started, I want to say a prayer. Well, I'd like everybody to say a prayer for Cynthia. She lost her husband, Roland, yesterday. And they're a paranormal couple, and they're very nice people up in Iowa. And if I knew how to say their last name, I would. But I can spell it, but I can't say it because I trip over my tongue. But I'm really sad for her. He had something happen with his heart on their wedding anniversary. They were married 10 years, and they had to do CPR on him 3 times to try to revive him, and he never woke up. And he passed away yesterday after she had to make some really tough decisions. So if you guys can go out there, I shared it on my page. There's a GoFundMe to help with the medical bills because he was in there 9 days. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming her way. So just keep Cynthia in your prayers tonight and be extra thankful for the spouse that you have with you and give him a big hug. So prayers for Cynthia. So on a lighter note now, my guest tonight is James A. Willis. He's an author. He lives up in the Ohio area. So we're going to find out some stuff about up there, and we're going to talk a little bit about his blog, because I found his blog by accident. Before I was ever told to get you on, I found your Helltown blog. And so we're going to talk a little about that as well. So I hope everybody's got their going to have some questions for you, because I know I did when I was just looking through all the web pages. So welcome to the Paranormal Pride, James.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm excited because, like I said, I watched that Helltown documentary.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm going to have to help. Well, what I told everybody is that it's a mockumentary. And because I thought, wow, this would be a great guy to have on my show, because I didn't know at the time. So the minute I started to look him up, I kept finding all this stuff. This is an actor. This is an actor. This is an actor. And none of the things were matching up to what I knew about Helltown from some other YouTube documentaries to what they were saying. And, nothing made a lot of sense. So for me, it was given away pretty quick. And then I found your blog.
Oh, and then it all fell apart, huh?
Oh, then it was all like, I knew that, because I had already found out that they were actors, but all the stuff that you had in the blog made me go, those little boogers, why would they do that? try to pass this off as a factual documentary when they're actually mocking what a documentary is about. And so one of the things that, first thing I wanted to know is, what is the truth about Helltown?
The truth is that an area known as Helltown does exist. Other than that, it's open to interpretation. I first got involved with the area that's known as Helltown back in 2001. I had moved to Ohio in 1999, and that was sort of in the top 5 locations. Everybody was like, you have to go to Helltown. And for your listeners who are not familiar with it, it's a real area. It gets kind of sketchy as to what area actually is Helltown, but it's basically Boston Mills, Boston Township of Ohio. It's in the Cuyahoga Valley, which if you watch the Helltown fake stuff, they don't even pronounce Cuyahoga correctly. So that's your first tip that it's all made up. The actors were all Canadian and didn't hide their accents, but the stories that were coming out of that area, it was kind of like Scooby-Doo land. If you had heard a ghost story, an urban legend, it was somehow attached to this area, but it all centered around a place that they called the end of the world, which was where they said that if you went down this one particular road, you would find the road would be blocked off with signs that said road closed, but that the road did indeed continue. And if you went around those signs and went further down the road, you would find an abandoned town that had the houses all looked like people had just, as they used to say in the South, up and left, leaving their belongings inside. And that furthermore, there were signs posted all over the buildings that said U.S. government property, no trespassing. Now, how they came to be abandoned was part of the urban legends, and it just spread. So it was everything from there was a toxic waste spill there, and they had to move everybody out, and the government tried to cover it up, to there was a serial killer down there who killed the entire town. Sometimes they combine the two of the spill and sort of like a Walking Dead type of thing, and that they called it Mutant Town or Mutane Town, where the toxic waste caused all of the residents to transform into these creatures that then devoured the rest of them. There was a school bus that supposedly another serial killer killed all the children inside of it, and that the bus was still down there. And even though they had taken all the seats out, late at night, the seats would magically appear with the ghosts of all the children in it, as well as the ghost of the serial killer. So there were all sorts of stories behind it. So in 2001, I spent probably about 6 months up in that area interviewing people. The local historians were a huge help. And the sad reality, the buildings, I should say, most of them are gone now, but back when I went up there, they were there. If you went past the road that did have the signs up, if you Google Helltown sign, you will probably get the photo that I took that is the most borrowed photograph on the internet. It's sort of a night shot, and it's got the road closed sign. But it did continue. You went down into the town. There were some very nice houses there. They were all boarded up. They did have red, white, and blue government property, U.S. government property, no trespassing signs all over them. So the gist of it, or the kernels of truth, were that there really was a abandoned bunch of houses that went down past that road. Now, the truth is that in the early 1970s, the government basically passed a law saying that they could almost declare what would be considered eminent domain and buy out houses out from under people if they were preparing or had an inkling that they were going to create things like national parks. And that's what the government did there. They went in. Cuyahoga Valley was going to extend, and that's why the area known as Helltown is now part of the Cuyahoga National Forest up there. You can walk through the area, But that's basically what happened. The government came in, put up their government property signs on it because they had bought the people out, and they forced the people to leave. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason that the buildings were still there is that originally they were boarded up because they were going to be used for local fire departments to practice sort of burning them down and doing controlled fires to sort of get practice in. But that never really happened. So a lot of the buildings and houses were still there. That is the historical fact behind it. Now, where all of these ghost stories came from was just because, you know, good urban legends never die. They just mutate, pardon the pun, every couple of years. And so the stories started changing. When I first went down there in 2001, there had been a school bus there that had been removed, which led to the thing that, they took it away because it was possessed and all this stuff. But really, it was somebody had bought one of the houses that needed to be fixed up, and it was right before the government had come in, so he got it for a good price, and he basically had an old school bus, and that's where he slept in. He slept in there while he was fixing up the house, and then when the government came in, they took everything away. So there were kernels there, and I think all of my reports, if you want to call it that, I think they hit right around late 2001, 2002. And it was all over the place. It was in the newspapers. I was doing interviews for it. And the whole gist of it was there's nothing really here. And it's actually kind of sad that we're going down and we're making up all these ghost stories when the sad reality is that these people lost their houses. They lost their lives in some cases because everything they had ever known was taken from them. So, you know, you could see why the locals didn't want to be known as, hey, you live in Helltown, and didn't take kindly to people coming up and going, how do you get into Helltown? Or, you know, these ghost hunters running around in the dead of night, running through the cemetery and that. So I thought that was actually when I got the nickname, the man who debunked Helltown, because I was the first one, which I found amazing, that actually published this stuff and said, there's nothing really there. It's a spooky area. But anytime you've got abandoned houses in the woods, you know, I always tell my wife that should be haunted. Look at it, you know, so you're going to get that down there. But I thought it was all said and done. And then when this Helltown lovely piece of whatever it is came out, there's absolutely no truth to any of the things they put in there, other than I do believe they touch upon the people being relocated. However, they go in and what they show as being archival footage, interviewing the people from the area. Mm-hmm. That's fake too.
Right.
So the vast majority is made up. There was never any stories of the Wendigo. There was never a girl that was attacked. I forget that's the big thing why everybody goes down there, because they have this sort of Blair Witch looking video that they show in the story. That never happened. It was all made up.
Well, the Blair Witch never happened either.
Correct. But
I'm from Baltimore. I would know.
Right. And what I meant by the similarities there is that I know. You're exactly right. Blair Witch took basically the Bell Witch haunting and kind of moved it into an actual location and then made a bunch of stuff up, but it came across as being real because the location was real. Mm-hmm. But the stories were complete BS. Helltown, I haven't watched it in a while, but that documentary or whatever they put out, I don't even think they filmed any of it in the area that's known as Helltown.
No, I think it was filmed in Canada with everything else. But you know, like I said, they presented it in such a way to where if you didn't know, you'd think it was real.
Yeah, and it's quite funny what you mentioned earlier that, you know, you stumbled across my website and found that there. I get alerts when my website, my blog gets a lot of hits that are, you know, I have an average amount of hits in a day, but if there's a spike, I get an alert. I now know when that Helltown piece is running somewhere because the hits just go through the roof. And I feel horrible when I get the emails from people that they're thanking me, but they're also like, man, I wanted that stuff to be true because I had my car packed. I was going up there. And I think that's the real damage because people often ask me, they're like, well, what's the harm? It was a scary story. For me, as someone who takes this paranormal quite seriously, I always tell people I come at it from the angle that I want to be taken seriously. And I feel that in order to be taken seriously, I have to admit that there's a lot of stuff out there that is just completely made up. And I think that made up things actually take away from the real ghost stories and the real paranormal events, because they end up people looking at and going, oh, there's nothing there. And I will say that while I never experienced anything when I was up there, and I've been there every couple of years after, since 2001, I never experienced anything that I would consider paranormal. That's not to say there's not something there. I just think if there is something there, it has gotten just overwhelmed and covered up by all the garbage stories that are just non-existent. And that's what I think is the real crime, when it gets to the point where these stories are covering up actual history and what could be actual paranormal activity, because they're just trying to, I don't know, frighten people or whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, like you say in your blog, 20 minutes in, it began to dawn on me that this huge review article I'd been planning could be boiled down to two simple words: it's fake. Because it's about how long it took me was about 20 minutes in, and I'm going, crap, and this is not real. And because I know that there's got to be information out there somewhere, if I decided to go and look, that's going to tell me why the government took over the property. Part of it tells me that it's a state park. Like, okay, that's fine, but it's not a big deal to me anymore, now that I know that that the claims made in that mockumentary are all fake. Because if there had been, I told my husband after I saw that, if there had been a Wendigo in Ohio, not on Supernatural, that would be interesting to find out about. And, is it similar to, it kind of makes me think of the movie The Village, where they fake like they have a horrible monster to keep the people in the compound so that they never leave. Right. In this case, they're acting like there had to be a reason why the people just up and left. Well, there was, and when people need to know that when it comes to eminent domain, they'll move you out for a Walmart. They don't care.
Right, exactly.
So whether it's a state park or to build a new dam, I mean, where we live, over in Missouri, we have 60 cemeteries that were flooded intentionally to make Lake of the Ozarks. That was eminent domain too. Nobody talks about all those ghost towns that are now underwater over there from when they moved all these people out. There's still houses. You can still see chimneys when the water's low. Wow. Out at Truman Lake, which is another one. So it's weird when you're driving across the road and you see a chimney sticking up out of the water.
I'll bet, yeah.
So, but Lake of the Ozarks is only one of the places where we have that many cemeteries and towns underwater. Probably where down in Branson, we got Lake Taneycomo, probably the same situation. I just never researched it to find out. And in the lake, like I said, it happens everywhere. Wherever you've got a big dam, you've got probably ghost towns underneath that. Sure, yeah. So, except for maybe Lake Mead. Don't know. It is desert. Not a lot of people live in the desert. Right. So, but everybody, you're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be back with James Willis in just a few minutes. So make sure you come back too.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
We are confident that none of our hosts are possessed. Being repossessed a few times, that might be a different story. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my guest tonight is James A. Willis. And if you missed any of this interview, you're going to have to go back and listen to from the beginning because this has been a really good show so far. So far we've learned, don't waste your time watching the Helltown mockumentary on Destination America. And if you have any questions about it, let me know. I'll tell you exactly what I think, just like always. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your first supernatural / paranormal experience. What was that?
Wow.
Got to go back in time.
I've got to go way back because I've been doing this, I guess you would say professionally, but I don't even know if you could, since the mid-1980s. And I think not necessarily paranormal. It'll give me time to actually think about my first real experience. But what really got me into it was in the third grade. I grew up in the Catskill Mountains of New York State, which is just a weird area. And it is fairly close to my elementary school is Tarrytown, which was used. It's kind of coming full circle. It was Blair Witch and sort of Helltown-like in that Washington Irving used Tarrytown for the Headless Horseman, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So he did the same thing. Tarrytown is a real location, and even some of the settings within there, so the bridge and the cemetery, he incorporated those into the story, as well as some of the characters. He took their names off people in the Tarrytown Cemetery. So it had a real air of being truth when I first heard it as a kid. And our third grade teacher for our field trip, we got to go out to Tarrytown and walked us around and showed us all the setting and then tried to convince us that that was proof that the Legend of Sleepy Hollow was a true story. And once I figured out that no, that it's kind of BS, that did send me down the path, though, of I believed in ghosts. I believe in all of those strange things. Well, hearing that the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, even though it appeared to be true, was not led me down the path of, well, where are the true ghost stories? And that got me into doing the research and trying to look into haunted locations and finding out stories behind them. Now, the one of the most impactful occurrences that I had was as a teenager, and we had actually gone out to this, had to be a haunted house. It was out in the woods, and we had gone with some friends, and I'd like to say that we were ghost hunting or that we had a cool group name with an acronym, but none of that stuff was even around. We just went to get out and looked for ghosts. Right. And the story behind this house, it seemed very out of place in the woods. It was abandoned. It had been for many years, and it had one of those 2-story fireplaces. And the story was that it was owned by a husband and wife at one point in time, and that they had a horrible fight. And what happened was that the husband, for whatever reason, decided he was going to solve the argument or end the argument by cutting off his wife's head, and that he threw it in the fireplace, and that if you went there, on certain nights, which I always say on certain nights is when I'm not there, but if you're there on certain nights, you would hear them arguing, and then you would hear the head kind of bouncing down through the fireplace, because I said it was a 2-story fireplace. So we went out there, of course, in the middle of the night, and it had a cellar or a basement, but it had those big, old-fashioned like storm cellar doors. And we went in through there, and we were sitting down in the basement. We were just sitting there, not thinking anything is going on, and nothing really was. And then we started to hear what sounded like people walking around above us. And so we got really quiet and we're listening, and then it sounded like they were kind of scuffling. It was definite footsteps. And then we heard this horrific bang in the fireplace. So I did what most ghost hunters do at the time. We ran. We went up the stairs, and we were just running blindly through the woods. And I remember to this day, it was like a light bulb went on. And I remember thinking, but you wanted that to happen. Why am I running? And so I turned around and I ran back. And of course, there was nothing in the fireplace. There was nothing there. I'm still partially convinced that other teenagers had gone out there and decided they were going to scare us, but I never found anything. But since that day, and I can't do math very well, but I was a teenager, and I'm not a teenager now, but ever since that day, whenever something happens that I think is paranormal or that I think something strange is happening, I'm always running at it, because I've never forgotten this is what you're looking for. You want these things to happen. So I'm always running at them now.
That's what I do. I go right into the midst of whatever it is. Spiders and not snakes. So far I have had no snakes, but rats and spiders. I don't like either, but for some reason, if I'm in a paranormal setting, I go right towards it. But if I'm at home, I'm yelling, Ron, come and get this thing. But I have killed more spiders in the last probably 10 years than I ever have in my entire life. And which is a big deal, because I used to get random people off the street to come in my house and kill spiders. I'm serious. We had one time we were in this house, and we live in a new neighborhood. Well, it was a new neighborhood then. We only had a few houses. This 17-year-old boy was walking by. I said, "Hey, are you afraid of spiders?" And he goes, "No." I said, "Can you come in here and kill the spider?" And then a few weeks ago, I was talking to my friends from the Missouri State Pen, and we were talking about a spider that was as big as my head. And all I did was try to get people away from it without being, I wasn't scared. I was just more concerned about them being scared and getting them away. But that's the only thing that's really changed about being a paranormal investigator, is that I don't run from that crap now. I kind of go towards it. Right. And Ron, one time he saw a shadow figure down a hallway, like it stuck its head out. This is at the Belvoir Winery up in Liberty, Missouri. Okay. He saw it, him and another guy, and they ran down the hall towards that thing so fast. And the floors there aren't good. And the last thing it needed was heavy vibrations. but they ran down there. So I understand about the running towards, and because that's how it is. So between all that, you have answered multiple questions as to how you got, if that's how it got started. So was there something in the paranormal research that you were doing that said, I need to do more of this, or I need to write some books write books for people so that they don't have to go through as much of the research as I did?
I think that was certainly part of it, but where the book sort of came in is I love to write, and I think what happened is once I started going on these investigations, and by that, again, I probably wasn't really going on anything that would be termed an official investigation until the very early 90s, I think. But even then, it was strange. It wasn't really until, TAPS and Ghost Hunters and those all came out that I started people going, oh, wait, you do that? Before you tell them what you do and they're like, wait, what does that mean? And I think I take after my dad, who I think was one of the world's greatest storytellers, because he never let the truth get in the way of a good story. He kind of exaggerated sometimes. But I think I took after him in that I always loved telling stories. And when I would go to a location, or even if I was just driving down the road and I saw something strange and I got off and I found, something weird. I mean, I remember in Indiana just driving down these back roads and then finding a little wooden sign that said the Chainsaw Garden, and went a little further down and there was I think there was almost 70 chainsaws, actual chainsaws, that were stuck in the ground in rows. Okay, fine. But to me, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So what would happen is I would come back from that and I would have this story in my head because I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. And in order to get those voices out of my head, I'd put them down on paper. And because I wanted to share those stories. And that's what, at that point, I was just sort of blogging or just writing down stuff in diaries and journals just to get them out. And I think it was right around 2003, I guess, Mark and Mark, the guys from Weird New Jersey, they had actually put out a book, Weird New Jersey, that had, all sorts weird stuff in New Jersey. And
there's a lot of weird stuff in New Jersey.
Oh, there is. There. Oh, yeah. There is. You and me both. I didn't live there, but I used to drive down in through there and go to Traction Park and all those places. But anyway, so the book was a huge success, and they put their two Mark heads together, and they were like, wow, there's 49 other weird states out there. So they decided they were going to put out a book called Weird US. And what they wanted to do is collect anything, weird stories. So it could be just a weird roadside oddity. It could be a ghost story. It could be a monster, a UFO sighting. But they wanted Weird US to have sort of a mixture from all 50 states. And when they were putting into a search engine, Weird and Ohio, they were getting me with my blog. At that point was just the Ghosts of Ohio blog. And so they asked me if I would contribute several stories to the Weird US. And one of them, oddly enough, it's like I planned it this way, was the Helltown story. They wanted to know more about my investigations up at Helltown. And then after that book was published, they came back to me and they said, you kind of have a weird eye, which I now take as a compliment. But back then I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, you just seem to be able to find weird stuff. Would you be interested in working on the book Weird Ohio? We're looking to get authors from different areas of the United States and just focus on a state in particular. So I was like, well, what does that entail? And they were like, well, we would pay you. You would have to go out to these different locations, take some pictures, and then write the stories about it. I'm like, but wait, you're going to pay me to do that? And at that point, that's what really sort of jump-started my author career, because after Weird Ohio, that led to Weird Indiana. There was a Weird US 2. There was Weird Hauntings, which was just all ghost stories. So it it just ballooned. And I think it all came back to, I just love sharing stories with people. And they were mainly just sort of in the oral tradition. I was just telling the stories. I just would write them down to get them out of my head. And that just sort of took off because and I just, for me, I absolutely love, well, there's a couple of things. The other thing that I think is so cool is that a lot of my family and friends, or people that knew me back when I was just spitting out these stories, they say that they can actually read something that I've written, and even before they get to it and be like, oh, okay, this is one of his stories, they can hear me in the words, because they're like, we know how you like to tell stories. And so my voice comes through. And I think that's really cool. But the other thing that I absolutely love is when people tell me, I never knew this place existed. I never knew that I lived, I don't know, 5 miles away from the world's largest ball of twine, or something, really.
Which is in Kansas.
Yes. Or Indiana, the world's largest ball of paint, just something. But for them to tell me, I never knew that existed. And then when I saw it in your book, we went out there, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I absolutely love that, because I think that ties back into why I think most of us got into this field. It's to go out there and experience something new, or to go and have an experience that we haven't had before. And I know nothing more than the best way that I suddenly feel alive is when I've spent my whole life not knowing something exists. Then I read about it in a book, and I suddenly turn a corner and it's right there in front of me. That to me is just an amazing thing. And I think that in general is what would keep everybody young at heart, is the idea that we don't have all the answers. We have not yet seen everything there is to see. But if we go out there and just kind of check things out, we can learn a whole lot more and really start enjoying life even more.
I can see how they would hear your voice when
because I haven't stopped talking, right?
No, because what I've read from you at this point is you write like you speak.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
So, see, I can say really nice things. People just don't know it.
No, I take that as a compliment, because I've always said, when people are like, do you think you're a good author? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm a darn good storyteller.
And that's what it takes. I mean, to get it put on paper is actually huge. And, the fact that, there's a lot of weird things in Indiana.
Yes.
I go across 64 a lot. We went through Indianapolis. We took 70 when we went to Gettysburg. I took 64 for years, 30 years, driving back and forth from Kansas City to eastern Kentucky. And I found some strange things along the way as well. Were they strange to you? I doubt it. But, it's not every day you go walking around. I thought Jasper, Indiana was right off the highway, and it's not. We got stuck back there for somebody had an accident, and apparently it was a death. And so we ended up off some weird road just trying to get to the hotel that I booked by accident. And because, the Jasper exit seems like it has a lot of stuff at it.
It does.
But it doesn't. But, we found that that's where Jasper transmissions were made the next day. I didn't know, but, when your husband's into cars, that's something that I should have known, But the next exit down, which if you go south is Santa Claus, Indiana.
Yes.
And if you go north is Ferdinand. And we went walking around. It was 107 degrees this day. We went walking around the convent there. And,
yeah.
And there is a church on that property that is not a Catholic church, but the Catholic Church takes care of it.
Yep.
So you know where I'm talking about.
I know exactly where you are, yeah.
And so when we parked all the way back by that church because it was shady. Mm-hmm. And so I got lots of pictures of this little church, and I was like, well, this is kind of weird. And we're not Catholic. But we went walking all around through there, up into the spiral staircase and all that. Went into the store, talked to some nuns. And it was a nice day. I mean, it was nice to do that because, like I said, it was 107 degrees. Mm-hmm. And, but, when you tell people, yeah, I went walking around this monastery, and they're like, why? And so I thought it was neat. The stained glass was pretty, and I just thought, and meeting the nuns was nice. They were very friendly. Of course they are. But, when I told them I wasn't Catholic, they weren't judgmental at all. I said I was just very interested in the building, mm-hmm. And so that was one of the strange places that we've been. Oh, and butt drugs. Had to go to butt drugs. I found out about it when we were driving. I love Corydon, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And so I looked up what's there to do in Corydon, Indiana, and butt drugs comes up. Yep. And their little advertisement with all the ample parking in the rear. Yep. And so I've taken my husband down there, and the guy and of course, they want everybody to get on Facebook to be their fannies. And
yes.
So
Did you?
was, yes, I am a fanny of butt drugs, but there's also a bed and breakfast there that we've wanted to stay in, but they're not open every day.
Huh.
And it's right across the street from the church in the middle of town there, in the old part of town. And I forgot what it was called, but I wanted to stay there. I think it was Squire Boone is one of the rooms that they have in there. So, but it starts with a K. And see, I can remember parts, but I've wanted to stay here all this time, and I haven't been across that way since my mom has passed. So someday I will, because it's still got to be better than the any of the hotels out by the highway. Right. It's got to be, because those hotels have gotten really bad. But again, years of going through. That used to be the first Arby's that we would come across until Arby's was nationwide again. There's a nice kid that works at the Walmart. He was Down syndrome, and every time he saw me, he would say, and I mean, keep in mind, I'd only go there once a year. It's been so long since I've seen you, and he would want to hug me,
right,
every single time. And so, like I said, I have some very good stories of Indiana. But what is the strangest thing in Indiana?
And kind of tying into what you were talking about, I think what you just explained is kind of what I like about Indiana, and that is that anybody who drives, even through Ohio, when you're going across 70, it looks like a whole lot of nothing. Mm-hmm. It's just flat and straight, and when you get to the exit, you hope that there's something when you get off there. But I think what we've kind of become as a society is that we just want to get as quick as possible from point A to point B. Mm-hmm. And what I tell people, because I get a lot of questions where they're like, well, where's there, is there someplace new that's haunted I can go to? And I'm like, just get off the highway and go. You're going to find something, and
that, we're going to have to take our break.
Okay.
So we will come back to this, I promise. Everybody, you're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be back in a few minutes.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my guest tonight is James A. Willis, and I hope you guys are enjoying this. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chats. I will make sure that I get them asked. So, and as Kat was telling us, April had a good question in here. What do you think of random, I don't know what that word is, maybe Kat does, randomauting and the app that takes you to quantum random points with attractors and voids? Randonauting?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, okay. It sounds to me like something with a GPS type thing that's going to go, okay, boom, here you go. Go here. I don't know. So I'll have to look that up, April. I'll have to find out some more about that.
I mean, it sounds like just from the randomizer that it just literally would send you to someplace random, I would guess, which I'm laughing, but
it's a generator. Okay.
But I'd be interested to see if it's just sending you someplace where you'd be in the middle of the woods, or if it's going to send you to a random spot, like a restaurant or I'd be more inclined to try that. That would be kind of neat. It would just be like a random adventure sort of thing you're going on.
Who knows? We'll find out. So
cool.
Is this something like, it sounds like it's like something from like Doctor Who, which her family's really into. At least I know her sister is. So April's my cousin. So like I said, it's interesting to think about, but like I said, I don't know anything about that. So I'll have to look that up. So yeah, thank you, April. I needed homework. So when we were talking about the strange things in Indiana and you started talking about I-70, I agree. Sometimes going off the beaten path makes the best adventures. That's how I found, see a sign on the side of the road that says Buffalo Trace Distillery this way. And I went and I had the greatest time. And I've taken my husband, since then my husband has been, every time we go to Kentucky, we have to go out there. So basically all your books are about going off the beaten path and making a different path to get from point A to point B. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of the neat thing is, as I was writing them, what I would do is create basically a map. I would have a set number of locations that I needed to hit for the book. So in the case of Weird Indiana, what I would normally do is have something set up where they would be anywhere between 10 and 15 different locations that we would hit when we were going out, and we would leave Friday night or sometimes very early Saturday morning, drive to the halfway point, spend the night wherever. We did spend the night in Santa Claus, and then hit the rest of them and come back Sunday. And 9 times out of 10, we would end up driving past other stuff that wasn't on the list. It wasn't supposed to be included in the book. It wasn't on any short list or anything like that, but it was just like, wait a second, that's weird. And what people often ask me, they were like, well, how did you figure, these books, where did the whole idea of doing these weird things come from in all of your books? And I said, well, we've all done this. we've all been driving down the road and looked off and been like, wow, that's weird. I wonder what the story is with that, and kept going. The only difference is with me, I turn around and go back. That's the only thing that I've done differently when I'm creating my research for it. But some of the places in Indiana that ended up being my favorite were ones that were off the beaten path, but also I had finished Weird Ohio, and so I have gotten used to sort of the way of the locals in Ohio, if you will, which is that you could be up taking pictures of something, and if somebody came up to you and they asked what you were doing, and I said, well, I'm doing this for Weird Ohio, Ohioans would say, oh, well, if you think that's weird, you need to check this out. And they would give you a list of different weird things. Ohioans are very proud to be weird and very proud to share that. When you go over into Indiana and you're just hopping over to the next state, they keep their weirdness very close to the Hoosier Vest, as it were. They're not very open about sharing their stories. But when they do, particularly their ghost stories and their urban legends, they are some of the most twisted stories I have ever heard. And so one of my all-time favorite locations is in a tiny little, I believe it's a town, but it's listed as a census-designated place. It's a very tiny town. And it's San Pierre, Indiana, which is kind of, I guess you're up in sort of the northwest. I think it's Stark County. But you're pushing sort of Illinois, and you're getting way up top there. But there is a location that the locals refer to as the Dog Face Bridge. And the idea is that classic urban legend type of ghost story is that a woman is driving down this lonely, deserted road, and she comes to a bridge. And there's little variations of the story, but the main part of the story is that a dog, it's usually a German Shepherd, but a dog runs out onto the bridge and she hits the dog. And that when people come out and find the wreckage there, that the woman is dead, the dog is dead. They find the woman's body, but it doesn't have a head. They find the dog, and the dog's head is missing and the body's there. So you've got this idea that this creature that now lurks around the bridge has got the body of a woman, but the head of a dog. And so there is now all this legend tripping that takes place where people dare each other to go out to the bridge, to the site where this supposedly happened in the middle of nowhere, and get out and walk onto the bridge, which last time I was there, I wouldn't recommend. The bridge is closed and it's seen better days. But if you do that, you are supposed to get chased off the bridge by this half woman, half dog. I guess it's more 3/4 woman, 1/4 dog, but creature that would chase you off of the bridge. I've been out there numerous times. Nothing ever happened, but I just love it because when you turn off of the main road and you start going down through this little road towards the bridge, you start to think, as weird as the story is, I wonder if it is true, because it just has that really creepy feeling that there's something there, even though the rational side of you is saying there is no way that this thing exists. But it's just a really interesting place to go to really just kind of get scared, I guess you could say. Another one, which is not really ghostly, but was not supposed to be in Weird Indiana, but it ended up being a focal point of the chapter on the roadside oddities, is a place that the place is actually called Needmore, which is spelt like it sounds. Mm-hmm. And they actually promoted it at one time as being the granite capital of the world. Mm-hmm. And because of that, as weird as this sounds, is a gentleman actually decided he wanted to create, made entirely out of limestone, to create out of limestone that he would pull from the quarries there, basically a tourist attraction that he was going to call the Limestone Tourist Park, that was going to have all of these things. His original plan was to build the 8 wonders of the world, including he wanted the Great Pyramid in there. He was going to do the Great Wall of China, all made out of limestone, and people were going to pay to walk through there. It never materialized, but portions of it were put together, including parts of the Great Pyramid. And in the middle of absolutely nowhere, you know you're there because there's these giant limestone pillars. If you get out and you walk back through the woods, you will find portions of the Great Pyramid. And all of these things are just made out of limestone, just sitting out there. They're very slowly being overtaken again. Nature is sort of reclaiming its own. But it's amazing because, again, you hear the story and you're like, wait, he actually did get funding to go and start building this. I believe it was for the longest time there was a thing called the Golden Fleece Awards, which was sent out, and it was kind of like the top money wasters that the government has wasted money on. And the Need More Pyramids was actually on that list year after year. But that was something not really ghostly, but just fascinating to go in and see that, wow, that thing really does exist. And then I think my other one that I like to visit, and I've been there several times, is over in Brazil, Indiana, and it's the 100 Steps Cemetery. And you been there?
No, but there is a college in Kentucky that it's called the University of Pikeville.
Okay.
They have 99 steps up the front to the front door of the college.
Okay.
So when it was originally built, so they've been having to keep those steps in working order because my mom went to college there. So it's right there. See, if you go to Weird, Kentucky, you probably find Pikeville, Kentucky, for something along the lines of either that or the Hatfields and McCoys.
Ah, okay.
Do you know that they're buried in the same cemetery?
No, I did not know that.
So, and it's up on the side of a mountain that you better take water and take the little rest stops in the stairs walking up the side of the mountain. But it's very odd when you think about it. And I mean, and it's not like they're buried in two separate parts of the graveyard. They're buried side by side.
Wow.
You know, so it was weird. I made my husband take me up to Dill Cemetery to see where they were buried because, you know, the Hatfields and McCoy had that mini series.
Yes.
I never saw it. Okay. Because my mom lived in the county where it was all at. So I knew firsthand some of the stories from there and, you know, different people that were married into so we got to hear about all these stories firsthand. And a lot of their history is right there at the University of Pikeville. So it's weird when you hear about it and, you know, but, you know, talking about all this weird stuff, it just brings to mind all those weird things that in my mind was always normal, but they're weird. Yeah. So, but every trip to Kentucky, like I said, we'd have to find something off the road. Eventually, you just got tired of driving from point A to point B.
Right. And
we had to drive a little off the road to find these unusual things to make the kids remember their trips to seeing grandma. Not just seeing grandma, but getting there. You know, when you leave at 2:00 in the morning from St. Louis, there's not a whole lot to see at that time. But when they got older, I got to the point to where we couldn't drive at night. Not that I wouldn't drive at night. It's just I didn't want to drive at night with lights hitting me in the face. And I wanted to see where I was driving.
Right.
As opposed to, you know, staying in the dark and having kids throw fireworks up over the bridge at the Wabash River, waking me up while I'm driving. You know, not that I was sleeping, but I was bored by then. But that's happened a couple times driving out there that would happen. But you know what? We're at the top of the hour break, everyone. I hope that you guys are going to go get yourselves a drink and maybe something else. And we will be back with James A. Willis and other things too. We're going to talk about some other things. I don't know exactly what yet, but I do have some really good ideas and questions to ask him. So You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be back after this news break.
This episode is sponsored by the Federal Communications Commission, with a message for everyone using a TV antenna to watch local channels. Plan to rescan as TV broadcast frequencies change. For more information, go to fcc.gov/TV rescan.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down a law in Louisiana that requires doctors to have hospital-admitting privileges in order to perform abortions. NPR's Nina Totenberg reports Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the court's liberal judges in today's 5-4 decision.
Well, this was a big opportunity for the court to start rolling back its abortion precedents, and it didn't do that. It stuck by its 2016 decision in which it said that a Texas law that required doctors who perform abortions at clinics, that law required them to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital.
NPR's Nina Totenberg reporting. The U.S. Supreme Court also dealt a partial blow to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in ruling the president can fire the director at will. NPR's Asma Khalid reports Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts is defending her signature achievement.
The Consumer Watchdog Agency was the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren, who at the time was a professor at Harvard Law School. It was created in the wake of the financial crisis, but it's long been a thorn in the side of many Republicans. This decision is largely a win for conservatives, but Warren tried to strike an optimistic tone. She took to Twitter to say that after years of industry attacks and GOP opposition, a conservative Supreme Court has affirmed that the CFPB itself and the law that created it are constitutional. Ruling that the president can fire the director without cause is a hit to the Bureau's fiercely guarded independence. But, she says, the court makes it clear the CFPB has the right to exist, and it's here to stay. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
170 immigrants took the oath to become U.S. citizens today in Fairfax, Virginia. NPR's Greg Myrie reports one is a former Afghan interpreter credited with saving the lives of 5 American troops in his homeland.
As an interpreter with the U.S. military, Janice Shinwari wasn't supposed to fight. But in 2008, an American unit was ambushed by the Taliban. Shinwari grabbed a rifle and rushed to the rescue of Army Captain Matt Zeller.
I saw Matt Zeller that he was alive in a ditch. And there were 2 Taliban behind him to kill him. And I shot those 2 Taliban and I saved Matt Zeller's life.
When Shinwari reached the U.S. in 2013, a GoFundMe campaign raised $35,000. He used the money to set up No One Left Behind, a group that helps resettle former interpreters here. Nearly 19,000 applicants are awaiting visas, which have slowed to a trickle. Greg Myrie, NPR News, Fairfax, Virginia.
At the close on Wall Street, the Dow was up 580 points, the Nasdaq up 116. This is NPR News in Washington. The coach of the Atlanta Hawks is challenging other NBA teams to help with elections this fall. Georgia Public Broadcasting's Stephen Fowler reports the Hawks and Fulton County just announced their arena will serve as a polling place in Atlanta.
The 700,000-square-foot State Farm Arena will be used as an early voting site in Georgia's most populous county for an August runoff and the November general election. Hawks coach Lloyd Pierce is calling for other teams to open their doors to the community and serve as polling places.
This will be a challenge to 29 other coaches in our league. We want to get 30 cities in our country being able to take part of everyone's right, which is the right to vote.
The arena is owned by the Atlanta-Fulton County Recreation Authority, which leases it to the Hawks. The Hawks will also offer free parking for voters during the 3-week early voting period, train arena staff to serve as poll workers, and put up billboards to encourage residents to get out to vote. For NPR News, I'm Stephen Fowler in Atlanta.
The governor of Arizona is ordering bars, nightclubs, gyms, movie theaters, and water parks to close for at least 30 days as the state continues to report a spike in the number of new coronavirus infections. A surge of new cases is prompting officials in numerous states to reconsider their reopening plans. In Florida, the mayor of Miami has ordered beaches closed for the July 4th holiday. In New Jersey, the governor announced today that indoor dining will be delayed until further notice. I'm Windsor Johnston, and you're listening to NPR News in Washington.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I hope you're all enjoying tonight's show. I am. I'm having a good time. So hopefully you are. And tonight my guest is James Willis, and we're talking about strange things. We're talking about paranormal things. We're talking about whatever we feel like talking about tonight. So on your website, I see that you have a kind of like entertainment type stuff. And we were talking earlier about the Blair Witch Project. And people have heard me talk about this before. I'm being from Maryland. I tell everybody all the time, if such a place existed, every teenager in the area would have known about where it was and, would go out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that you have charred brick from the fireplace of Rustin Parr's house, the house at the end of the movie, and dirt from his home. And, Burkittsville, Maryland, that movie ruined that poor town.
It did. It really did.
And so, but again, there are people out there to this day that are still quoting that it was real, that the Blair Witch was real. And I'm like, no, it isn't.
Right. And that's where we were kind of talking about it earlier, since they took, that abandoned house that was out there, and they just said, well, no, that's actually Rustin Parr's house. The house, it's long since gone, but the house did exist. The same thing as what they just called Coffin Rock, that formation was there. They just went and made up a whole story to attach it to it. And that seemed to be enough for people to suddenly believe in everything wholesale. Everything in it must have been real, as opposed to, as you said, if those events had actually happened, not only the story of the witch, but actually what supposedly happened to the three of them when they went out to investigate, it would be all over the place.
It would be. And not only that, there was another group that ended up doing a thing on one of the TV shows. It was one of the reenactment shows that they went out there in the 70s in a Volkswagen, these girls, and that they had an experience with the Blair Witch. And I'm like, no, you didn't. You're making it up. And that goes back to when we first began talking about the fakery that's out there, that people really truly believe the stuff that some of these legends are made of, even though there is no truth to the legend to begin with.
Yeah, and I think that you're exactly right. And I think that sort of does a disservice to people that, like myself, that say that they are, a paranormal researcher. They will actually go back and dig into the history, as opposed to just hearing a story and then going out there without digging into the actual history. Because if you were to if you were to have watched the Blair Witch and then even done a little bit of research, it wouldn't take very long to find out that after it was initially released, the creators were very open about saying, well, what they basically did to create this whole mythos, if you will, of the Blair Witch was that they took the Bell Witch haunting from Tennessee, and then they also took the idea of Dudleytown, which is another urban legend sort of thing, and they smashed the two together and just made a bunch of things up. So you wouldn't have to do too much research to get into that. And I always tell people where they say, well, I just want to go out and see if I experience anything. The history, I don't really care about that. And to me, that's, if I were to go out somewhere and go walking through the woods somewhere and see the ghost of a woman, I don't know, in a white dress, stereotypical, standing there, and I saw it, that would be kind of cool. But it's just a personal experience. Whereas if I had actually done the research and found that a a woman who used to always, I'm making all this up obviously, but always wore her wedding dress because her husband to be left her at the altar, and she lived in a shack and wore her wedding dress until her dying day. And if you go to this spot, you will see her ghost still dressed in the wedding dress. And then I go out there and I find, well, I've done historical research and found that that woman really did live out there. She really did wear a wedding dress, Again, I'm making all this up, but then if I were to have find all that historical information and I go out to the location where her house once stood, and then I see a ghost of a woman dressed in a white dress, I think that all of a sudden takes it out of being a personal experience and turns it into, wow, I think that is really something that could be considered evidence of the paranormal, as opposed to, I think I just caught something, but I'm not really sure of the context and where it fits into the actual history.
The history I find, I'm a big history person. I'm a fact person. I like facts. Mm-hmm. Everything I do is data driven. So a lot of the times when we go to these places, if somebody tells me something, I'll go without knowing any history to start with. Okay. Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind. I don't go to a paranormal location with a whole lot of information behind it. I kind of go blind. But after I go, then it's open season on the history and stuff. And a lot of these places get holes poked in them because of the fact that they'll tell you a story and say things such as, this many people died here. Do you have any proof? You can find that out. Or no, this person didn't die here. They did die in this town, but they didn't die here in this location. Can you? And they're going, can you prove it? And I'm like, yeah, I can. Look. And I've done that to quite a couple paranormal locations and gave them their history back. And some of them have even changed their tours to incorporate the information that I gave them.
Oh, that's cool.
Because it was so different than the history that they had. But, there are so many giving tours and stuff. I would tell people there are legends that go with this location. These are the legends. Now here's the facts. You can take what you want, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And if you still leave here believing the legend, that's up to you. But here's the truth. And I haven't read any of your books, so I can't speak for you. But is that how your books are, where they go into the facts of that haunted location or weird location?
It really depends on the book, but by and large, yes. The notable exception would probably be the Big Book of Ohio Ghost Stories, because the purpose of that book was less to find out the truth behind the legends. It was more of the idea of collecting all of Ohio's urban legends and ghost stories in one place. So it was taking the most popular ghost stories and just retelling them. The point of that was to just show how ghost stories have sort of become a part of everyone's history, and that they've heard these stories regardless of whether or not they were true. But that's probably the one exception. By and large, I always try to visit the locations that I'm writing about, because I think that adds a certain level of, not necessarily authenticity, but it allows me to say, well, there were all these stories about this part of the building, but guess what? That part of the building has never existed. So it gives opportunities as sort of a first person. I was there and this is what I saw. For my book, Ohio's Historic Haunts, what I did is I wanted to actually not only show how historic buildings throughout the world, but I was focusing just on Ohio, but that historic buildings, some of them over time will gain a reputation as being haunted, and that even if you can't validate the haunting, that ghost story will work to keep actual history alive. So it was sort of finding that point where ghost stories and actual history merge together. And so for that, I focused on, I think there ended up being 21 different locations in the book. And each one of those locations got its own chapter that I divided into thirds. The first third was straight ahead history, when the building was built, what it was built for, who owned it, those sort of things. The second third of each chapter was devoted to the ghost stories. But what I wanted to do was, I didn't want to look at other books. I didn't want to sort of troll the internet and find information there. I wanted to get first-person accounts. And so it ended up being 220 hours, I think, of one-on-one interviews with previous employees, owners, those sort of things. And the other reason I did that was I wanted to be able to look these people in the eye as they were telling the story, so that I could say to anyone who asked, did that really happen? I can say, I don't know. But as they told me the story, I looked them dead in the eye and I didn't call BS. They actually believed that they did have that personal encounter. And I think that goes back to that sort of the idea that a paranormal encounter is a very personal experience, where some people, just hearing a knock in another room is enough evidence, if you will, where other people would need to, sit down and, enjoy a fine glass of wine with a ghost before they think it's there. So I thought that actually worked to sort of get that first person experience. And then for the last third of each chapter, I got locked in the building overnight with all this fancy ghost hunting equipment to see if I could actually have a paranormal encounter. And if I did, fantastic. But if I didn't, it wasn't like each chapter ended with a, haunted or not haunted stamp. It was just to show how it all came together. And plus, I'm a firm believer of, as much as these reality shows would like to lead you to believe that ghosts operate and perform on command, they don't. And so I was willing to accept that, the ghost might not have been out that particular night that I was there. It doesn't mean it's not haunted. It just wasn't my night.
Right. Or it didn't like you, and it was social distancing.
That's true. I think more even before the social distancing, I'm ready to accept the fact that maybe ghosts don't like me very much. But
well, where is your favorite place, haunted place in Ohio?
There's probably a couple. I mean, I've always been partial to the Mansfield Reformatory. That is a place that I've been like numerous times, and it never fails to deliver something. It's a huge place, and not only are you getting the history of it, but there's a lot of Hollywood history, because the vast majority of Shawshank Redemption was filmed there. And since after they wrapped filming there, the building was scheduled to get knocked down. And so they left a lot of the props behind, and it didn't get knocked down. And so all of the props are still there, including, my personal favorite, because Mansfield Reformatory is set up in such a way as that the warden and his family live there. So there is a whole, I believe it's 4-story structure in the front that is connected to the prison itself, where the warden and his family would live. So a lot of scenes in Shawshank Redemption that don't appear to be a prison, such as the boarding house and those sort of things, they were still filmed within Mansfield Reformatory. So the part where, I don't want to give anything away in case there's two of your listeners who haven't seen the movie yet for whatever reason, but there's a very famous scene where two of the characters write up on the wall, Brooks was here, and then a character, Red, writes, so was Red. That is actually still up on the wall at Mansfield Reformatory where they filmed that particular scene. So I love going there. Another location, which unfortunately is not giving any public tours anymore, was the Bisman Building, which was also in Mansfield. That was in my book, Ohio's Historic Haunts. And the reason it was so fascinating was that it was called the Bisman Building because the Bisman family owned it. And it was like a wholesale grocers, but they also roasted their own coffee there. It was built using a lot of the same materials from Mansfield Reformatory. It was right along the same railway line, but enormous structure. And when I went there, it was owned by I'm going to say fifth generation, but that might be wrong, fourth or fifth generation Bisman. So I was able to sit down with him and not only get the history of the building, but actually get the origins of the ghost stories that were associated with the building. So that was a fascinating place to go to. I enjoy going to the Oliver House that's in Toledo, Ohio. It's a place that not many people, a lot of people know about the building. It's a unique setup, and that's a very large historic building that is sort of divided up with different smaller restaurants. So you can get everything from, dessert pastries to a steak dinner, depending on which of the little restaurants you go to within there. But it's not as well known for having ghosts, but we had some interesting activity when we were there. Probably the most intriguing yet frustrating is that when we were setting up our audio, and I use studio microphones that I hook up to mic stands with shock mounts so they don't move at all, and I hardwire them into a professional mixing board. And I was trying to set up one of the microphones next to this hallway where they had heard activity. And I gave up doing that because the air conditioning kept kicking on, and the blower was right near there, and it was just drowning out everything. And so we ended up moving the microphone. But what was funny is that I always go back and listen to everything, because going back to what I said earlier, I'm convinced ghosts don't like me and they just like to mess with me. So I listen to everything. I watch everything. And on the part where I didn't listen to it in real time because I thought it was unusable, where you hear me and I'm there with the only other person in the building, which was a woman who was helping me with, kind of the lights and everything before she left. We're having this conversation that the blower is too loud, and we're going back and forth, and it's just the two of us. But over that, our voices and over the blower noise is a person whistling, and they whistle. It is in tune. It rises and falls. It goes on for about 45 seconds. It is not the sort of noise you would get from like a air conditioning or something like that of wind going through. It is definitely, it sounds just like a person whistling a tune, and it's not, no music comes in. So it's not like, I don't know, Billy Joel's The Stranger, the introduction. I can't believe I just said that. It's not like, Guns N' Roses Civil War. There, see, I got a little harder there. But it's not like it's an intro to a song, a popular song that was somehow playing in the background somewhere. And these microphones are all hardwired, so it's not like we had a wireless thing coming in. It's just frustrating because I've had some of my audio geeks try to go in and play with it to try to pull it out to see if we can recognize the song. And nobody's been able to, we can't recognize it, but it definitely sounds like a person whistling a tune.
Well, you know what? We're going to take this break so we'll be back. You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be back with you guys in just a couple minutes.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
We are confident that none of our hosts are possessed. Being repossessed a few times? That might be a different story. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my guest tonight is James A. Willis. He's an author and a blogger and an adventurist. He's overall just odd, and he admits that himself. So one of the questions we have in the chat for you, and do you have a good 4th of July ghost story?
Wow. That's a great question. I don't know if I do.
Well, maybe there. I guess maybe if you were in an area like Baltimore or someplace like that. I have a guest in here that's having a temper tantrum. Or wanting to play with grandma at this time. But, if we were someplace like Boston, Philadelphia, someplace like that, we probably would have a good ghost story for the 4th of July.
Yeah, I mean, I've got weird stories about the 4th of July, but that's normally related to my dad buying like illegal fireworks that were a bit soggy and him trying to set them off and setting the backyard on fire. So it might be a weird story, but not really a ghost story.
Well, thank goodness it didn't turn into one.
It's true.
Yeah, my family has a thing about blowing things up too. So believe me, I know. So, let me think here. My brain's on keeping the kid from killing himself. So, what is... you were talking about you're doing your paranormal investigations. Do you have a favorite piece of equipment that you'd like to use during those investigations?
I think it sort of varies depending on the location that we're actually going into. And one of the pieces of equipment that I like is it's basically a data logging system. It's called Vernier Lab Pro. And basically what you do with it is it's designed for sort of like high school science experiments. So it's a data logger that there's probably dozens, if not 100 different remote sensors that you can plug into this device. And I think you can use up to 5 or 6 of them at one time. So you can use multiple spot temperature devices, multiple ambient ones. You can use an EMF. There's static electricity. There's motion detectors, and I sort of use it as almost like a ghost hunting tackle box, because based on the location that we go into, if they say, well, we feel cold spots going down the hallway, well, we can rig up multiple ambient temperature devices down the hallway. And then when you plug them into the data logger and just hit record, it will actually take a reading every half a second, and it will basically put it into where you can go back later and look at it in grid format. I will sometimes use it with my laptop, but it's basically just to watch it so we can see if there's anything triggering it. But I tend to like to use that because it allows me to set that up, and then it leaves my hands free. I'll take maybe, a camera with me. I do have a video camera rig that I will, but it gets to the point where, I've got the big photographer's vest that's got, the 8,000 pockets and zippers, and I forget where I put half the stuff. And so I tend to like to use the data logger to go ahead and do its thing, and then I can just sort of sit down quietly and try to get in touch, or just kind of get used to the environment and then go from there.
Is the data logger like the EDI meter?
It's similar, but it is basically it's probably about a 2 foot by 3 foot box that you plug in the sensors to. So if you have the temperature devices, all of them would have the actual sensor itself, and then a cable that you would plug into the box, and that's really all that you need. It would just, you turn it on and it just starts recording all of them at once. If you wanted to actually run it into like a computer screen so that you could watch the changes in real time, as opposed to just recording them and then playing them back later, you would just need an extra cable to plug into that. And on some of the larger investigations that I do, we will have people that will sit in front of the monitor and watch it, so that if something does happen in real time, they can actually alert us, and then we can focus on that particular area. And it's worked beautifully, because we've had instances. There is the building called the Clay House. It's a wonderful restaurant in Somerset, Ohio. And they had reports of employees that were taking their breaks. As I said, it's a restaurant down on the first floor in view of sort of this staircase with a landing, that they would see people come down halfway down the bottom part of the stairs, who they initially thought was maybe a guest, or, someone that was looking for the restroom and was, lost in the building, but they would always turn around and go back up. And we set up all the temperature devices as well as the EMFs on the staircase, going from the top of the stairs across the landing and then down the next floor. And while we were in full view of the staircase, we saw what looked like basically all the devices triggering one after the other. And it mirrored what we did when we were kind of doing a walkthrough and testing it. It mirrored what looked like what a person would do if they were coming down the stairs, across the landing, halfway down the second, and then turning around and going back up. But there was nobody there. As a matter of fact, the first time that it did it, I was watching the monitor and looked up at the staircase, thinking I was going to see one of the people who were with me come walking down the stairs, but there was nobody there.
That happens sometimes.
It does. And those, it doesn't happen for me as much as I would like it to, but those are the little nuggets that keep me going. Those little head scratches where you're like, yeah, I don't know how to explain that. There's something there. That's what keeps me going.
Right. Has there been a place that you've been that you've had a strange feeling in, but got no evidence?
Yeah. I mean, that happens quite a lot. And that's where you were talking about it earlier, that like when you go into a location, you don't really want to know any of the history. We go back and forth with that. And I personally go back and forth as to wanting to know the history, and as opposed to not wanting to know the history, because I can't help but think sometimes when you go into a location, you've got in the back of your mind, okay, this is haunted, and I'm going into this place, and I'm down in the basement, and basements are always haunted. So I start to feel something weird, but there's really nothing there. You're just kind of psyching yourself out for something like that. So I'm always leery of something like that. But that being said, there's been instances where I personally have started feeling something, and I'm like, there's something here. And as I was joking about, I think that ghosts don't like me, but I am always trying to make myself more open to having the experience and being very polite and very passionate about what I do, because I think that if the ghost can hear me, maybe if I convince it that I am somebody, kind of cool to hang out with, they're going to be more open to try to have that conversation. So I've done that and had instances where I did feel something and I was convinced there was something there, but there was nothing on video. There was no audio. The equipment didn't do anything. And you're left going, I don't know. I mean, there was a really interesting Farnham Manor is another location in Ohio that I like to go to. It has a very rich history, and I covered it for Ohio's Historic Haunts, and then went back there the following year to sort of give a presentation on our findings. And then the people who were in the audience, some of them got to hang around and kind of go on a ghost hunt with us afterwards. And I talked about something weird that we had felt on the previous investigation up in this one particular bedroom. And after it, the people started going on their tour, and I was downstairs sort of picking up, and then they were like, you need to come up here. We feel something. And I went up there thinking, oh, sure, it's because I just told the story about feeling something in this room. Now everybody's going to feel it. But sure enough, it was one of the weirdest things. There was an area in the middle of the room where you could literally put your hand into it and your hair on your arms would go up. And everybody was doing it. It was this really kind of interesting, just very sort of hippie kind of thing. We were all gathered together and we would take turns sticking our hands into this area of space where there was nothing there. The equipment was doing absolutely nothing, but you could feel that there was something there. And I've never felt anything like that before or since, and have no explanation as to what that was.
What, that happens a lot to me in public places.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in a random aisle in Walmart, or just walking through a park, things will happen that I'll feel, and I won't know why. Especially Walmart. I mean, I have no clue why it happens in Walmart. I just figure it's the people's energy around me.
I mean, there could be something to that. I mean, because there's that age-old thing where they say that the ghosts are picking up on our energy and using that to do whatever. Well, I mean, that if you can pick up on that, why couldn't you pick up on other people's energy? I mean, I think that there's something to the idea where, and I tell people, I think we're all psychic to a certain extent, because you can go, people have all done this. You've gone into a room full of strangers and said, I don't like that person. And you're like, well, why? You've never met them before. Well, I get a bad vibe off of them. Mm-hmm. I think that's being psychic to a certain extent, because you are picking up on something that is not necessarily tangible, yet you're picking up on it. So I think, walking through the Walmart, I mean, that might not be ghostly, but I do think that would make sense that you are picking up on people's, not necessarily auras, but, what you're picking up what they're putting out, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's very, very possible. And as you were talking about that, there have been times where I was in a room full of people that I met someone that I wanted to distance myself from right away.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nothing they said or nothing they did. It was just something about either the handshake, not that the handshake was weird, but something that I felt from them that I just didn't want to be around.
Yeah,
and
I think
I don't know how that happens. Yeah, I just don't know how that happens.
I think it's just it's intuition, even though it's a bit subconscious. We're not actively trying to pick up on things. But I mean, even if you look at, I think there is something to the idea that animals are able to pick up on that. I mean, we've all been around animals, dogs, that just start growling at people who come into the room, and you're like, the person is not acting menacing. They're not doing anything wrong. The dog is normally friendly. Why is it acting like that? I think it's picking up on something that's not necessarily tangible.
Well, I always tell people, if a child or an animal will come to that person, you have nothing to fear.
There you go. Yeah.
And I've actually we were standing in line one day getting ice cream at a store in Atchison, Kansas. And this little boy whom I've never ever seen before, looks up at me, puts his hands up, and wants me to pick him up. And and his mother just shook her head that it was okay. And she goes, because he doesn't like strangers. I picked him up and he put his head on my shoulder and started to fall asleep. And I told the mother, whom I've never met before, I said, kids like me. I said, I used to run a daycare, so they know I don't want them. I'm not going to run off with them. And so she just thought it was funny because this little boy, he didn't know who I was, and he hated strangers. Every time he'd see one, he'd cry, but he wanted to be on me like white on rice. And so it kind of made me go, oh, but it happens everywhere. I'll have people walk up to me and ask me where stuff is in Walmart, even if I'm not wearing brown and blue, which I hardly ever wear, but people will ask me where stuff is. I am apparently highly approachable.
Well, I think, and going back to, the child doing that, they talk about, children being able to see ghosts. And I think there could be something to that, because in much the same way, as animals, they take in everything they see as being reality. And I think children are much the same way when it comes to the paranormal, because, let's be honest, they're young. The weight of the world hasn't crushed their spirit yet, and they haven't been told that's not real. They just take in everything they see as being a reality. So you could flip that and probably make the argument that that would pertain to ghosts. If they see someone walk into the room, they haven't been programmed yet to be like, that's not real. We all have to, as I said earlier, I'm trying to sort of reprogram myself to make myself more open to having that experience. Whereas when you're a child and you haven't been taught they don't exist yet, you just take it in as being reality.
I can see that. In fact, I had someone reach out to me just yesterday about their adults, about trying to reawaken their sense of their sensing of spirits. He called it his shine.
There you go.
And because they believe that their son is an empath. And so that's one of the things that I try to help people with is, if they really want to do it, you can reawaken it. It takes time, but you can reawaken it.
Yeah.
And it was because mine was kind of shut down for a little bit as well. When I was growing up, I was told, nah, you don't want people to think you're crazy. And it's like, I guess now I do. I guess I want people to think I'm crazy now. I don't know. Or maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's just something that should be, addressed, and so other people can see, and maybe they can help you get through it as well. The getting to see spirits and hear them and all that. I think you need groups sometimes to help through that. But we're at our last break. You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be back with James in just a few minutes.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore, and my guest tonight is James A. Willis. And James, how can people reach out to you?
The easiest way is probably if you are interested in finding out more about me or reaching out to me, you can go to strangeandspookyworld.com. And that is my blog and my author site where you can contact me through there. If you wanted specifically just the ghost stuff, my organization is ghostsofOhio.org. I'm all over Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all these social media things I really don't understand, but I do post things on them, so you can find me there. Or if you really don't know how to find me, believe it or not, if you type Weird Willis into a search engine, you'll find me.
What you talking about, Willis?
There you go.
Not that you haven't ever heard that. I mean,
no, but the funny thing is that when I got married, my wife, it was her favorite shirt that she found. It actually said, "I'm what Willis was talking about."
That's good for her. It's just when I told my husband who I had on, he gave me this look like, and I knew what he was going to say, because we all like different strokes. It was a fun show.
It was a great show. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right. I've heard that for a long time. And now, unfortunately, when I hear it, I feel bad, not only for myself, but for the person saying it, because I'm like, oh man, we're kind of old. That's not really a thing anymore, but it's still funny.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just part of growing up in the 80s and 90s.
Exactly.
Well, not growing up. I guess I was already grown up. By then I was having kids, but it was still part of my younger years. And the 80s were a great time to be alive.
They were indeed.
We had a lot of fun. Oh yeah, we had great music. I mean, 80s on 8. That's all I listen to. Well, I listen to 70s on 7 too, but I kind of avoid the 90s and the 60s. but for me, that's all I need, and I'm good. It was a good time to have, to explore all these things that you've been talking about, because a lot of us did most of our exploring when we were in, between the ages of 12 and 30. Once you get into having kids, you kind of stop exploring for a little bit because you got to focus. But then we get older and then we go exploring again.
Yeah, and I lucked out because I've been truly blessed to not only have a wife, but a daughter that kind of still thinks I'm somewhat cool. So the three of us still get to go, not so much for the ghost things, but, the roadside oddities and those sort of things whenever we go on like a road trip or if we're traveling somewhere for vacation. If we're driving, they tolerate me going, "Ooh, I want to go look at that. That's a weird place." So,
well, again, when point A to point B is a squiggly line.
Yeah.
It's much more fun than when point A to point B is a straight line. Of course, unless that straight line's I-70, and then you don't have much of a choice. Because, you got a lot to explore from Baltimore to Cove Fort, Utah. And I can guarantee most people have no clue what in the heck I'm talking about, because I-70 starts in a park in Baltimore. And I'm probably one of the few people that has been all along the entire thing. From point A to, and we even we explored Cove Fort last year. It's right at the end of I-70, and it is a strange place. So if you ever get to that part of Utah, there are some strange things on I-70 in Utah. There's not much, but there's a ghost tree and a ghost rock, and
what's a ghost tree?
It's just a place. there's a canyon there, and they call this tree a ghost tree, and this rock over here is Ghost Rock. It's a huge rock, but you can stop almost anywhere on I-70 in Utah and get out and take pictures. There's all these little pull-offs everywhere. Overlook, like in Virginia, they call them an overlook. You pull off to the side of the road and you park. Well, in Utah, it seems like every 4 or 5 miles they have one to where you can go look at the ravines and the rock structures, and there's really no rest areas, but they have porta potties out there, so you at least have some place to go to the bathroom. But it's like driving through West Virginia. There's long distances between exits.
Huh.
So it's really kind of pretty, and you can go 85, which is nice.
Sweet.
So, but our trips consist of where's the best place to eat and get ice cream along the way that we don't have at home. So I can tell you every ice cream place to stop at along I-70.
Oh, good to know. Good to know.
And 64. And so, but that's me. So since you do all this traveling and stuff for, I don't know if it's your job, but for your books, do you have a bucket list place that you want to go?
The one place that I haven't, I've again been truly blessed in that there were places on my bucket list that I was, as I go along, able to cross off. The one place that I still want to go is Easter Island.
Oh, well, yeah.
So that's a kind of lofty bucket list. So I've had a list before bucket lists were a thing, but I started small, so they were just like places that I knew I had a chance to get into or to actually see. And over the years, I've been cutting it down and haven't really added any to it. But yeah, Easter Island is the one that is still on there.
I can see that. So what was your favorite place to visit in the United States that used to be on your bucket list?
Wow. There were a bunch of them, but oddly enough, the one was Helltown was actually on it when I first moved here. But another place, believe it or not, was Oxford, Ohio, which was it's home to a headless motorcycle ghost, which, and I don't know why, but Ohio has more headless motorcycle ghosts per capita than any other state. So I'm not really sure why that is.
It's foreshadowing the really crappy drivers there.
It could be. I mean, I tend to go the other direction and say, well, I started with a headless horseman when I was a kid, and now I'm a headless motorcycle that they've upped what they're riding on. But I don't know. But the story was always that unlike a lot of these sort of not just motorcycle ghosts, but like you would see this ghostly light. Down in Oxford, you were supposed to actually be able to see this light, regardless. You didn't have to go out at a special time. You just went up and down this road, and you were supposed to see this headlight that was supposed to be the light from a motorcycle of a guy who actually died in a motorcycle crash on that road that there is absolutely no record of. So I wanted to go because I'm like, there can't be anything there. And lo and behold, I not only went there, but ended up marrying a girl from Oxford, Ohio. And she's still my wife after all this too. But the fascinating thing is that we did go there. And since her parents still live in Oxford, I've probably been there dozens of times looking for this motorcycle ghost. And you see it. You see this light. I have multiple videos of it that I bring whenever I give presentations. Everybody wants to see it. It is a light that is about the height of what a motorcycle headlight would be in the other lane coming towards you. It is bright enough that it puts off its own shadow. It's in the middle of the road. There's no sound. And then just as it gets close to you, it blinks out. And it doesn't turnout, for lack of a better term, is if it's going around a corner. It's on a straightaway when it does it, and it is the strangest thing I've ever seen.
It does sound odd.
Yeah, I tell people I can't say it's ghostly because I don't know how this works, but we've tried everything where people say it's car headlights from a side road. It's not. We've gone up and down that road, and I always tell people, going back to what we were talking about earlier, here's your chance to experience something new. Send me an email or something like that, or if we bump into each other, talk to me about it. I will give you directions. I will tell you the exact part of the road where you need to be, and remind you not to stop on the road or pull off and flash your lights, because then you'll bump into the Oxford police who don't care about ghosts and don't like that you're doing that. But if you just drive up and down the road, eventually you will see something. So I tell people, go there and figure it out. And then let me know, because I want to know what this is. It's unexplainable, but it was something that was on my bucket list, and it ends up being something I am thankful that I am able to return to time and time again to continue to investigate.
Well, is there a special project that you're working on these days?
There is actually 3 that I'm working on right now, and I don't ever like to jinx it because by saying exactly what it is, but 2 of them are actually related to Ohio or Midwest, and then one is actually probably going to be several years in the making, but that is going to be paranormal across the world.
Oh, okay. So you got some traveling in your future when you're allowed to travel.
If and when I'm allowed to, yeah. That's why I'm thinking it's going to be several years in the making for this. But hey, it's something to keep you busy.
Do you investigate also Bigfoot sightings, UFO type stuff as well?
Yeah, have weirdness, we'll travel. But by and large, yeah, it's the bulk of what I do is with ghosts. But I have done a lot of UFO things. Again, going back to my upbringing in the Catskill Mountains, I did see there was a huge UFO, and it's officially called a flap for whatever reason, when there's a bunch of sightings, but in the mid-1980s of a giant UFO, which I did see, and it became the subject of a book called Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO sightings, as well as Bigfoot is supposedly roaming around the Catskill Mountains. So yeah, I've tried and true. I've been looking for all sorts of those things, and by and large, I would say the Bigfoot investigating tends to scare me the most of all, because when you're in the middle of the woods and you're there with these experts, and they're like, you hear something rustling in the woods, and they're like, that's a squatch, and I'm like, I don't know if it is, but it sounds big enough that it could probably eat me. So I'm not really comfortable.
Well, there are bears in the Catskills.
Yeah. There's a little bit of everything out there.
Yeah, I know. And where we live, we recently they've been talking about bears over here, but we have a wildcat sanctuary not 5 miles down the road.
Wow.
And we have a rogue mountain lion. And they try to tell us that they don't. But I said, well, I saw it. I saw it walking between, over to the elementary school. I was figuring it was thinking easy pickings, but it was summer. So there were no kids. But yeah, I saw it. It was the same color as a golden retriever, but a whole lot bigger. And it was just kind of slinking across the street, and, people kept telling me, no, you did not see that. Yes, I did. Don't tell me. I know what bears and mountain lions look like. I did grow up in Virginia and West Virginia, and you've heard me say I grew up in Maryland. I grew up all over that area out on the East Coast. And so, I saw all this crap growing up. Don't tell me what I didn't see.
Right.
And, but, I find it odd though. Every time we've gone down to Gatlinburg, not seen a bear yet.
Really?
Yep. Every time. But I've been drunk a lot too down there. So that's a whole different story. I mean, it is the home of Old Smoky.
Yes.
So, but that's a whole different story. My spirit and spirit stories can get out of whack really quick. So I would like to thank you so much for being on with me tonight. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
Definitely. Yeah. Just let me know. It was my pleasure. I had a blast. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I hope everybody will join me next Monday night at 7 p.m. Central, when I'm going to be talking to Bud Steed. Make sure you go out there and check out the post on Facebook. It's actually got a link in it where if you sign up for Bud's mailing list, you can get a free ebook. So you might want to read that before I have him on. Might be fun. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'll see you next week.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.